Hello and happy Friday. Welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into your favorite malicious compliance. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, there just might be some tasty cookies in your near future. Alright, our first story today comes to us from the Empress of the World. You want me to be responsible for everyone else's job? Okay, let's jump right in. First time poster, so apologies ahead of time, but I was remembering this story last night and thought it might be appropriate here. Years ago, I worked for an independent dog boarding facility as a customer service representative. Because I was low man on the totem pole, I often got the evening shift. The managers all left an hour or two early, leaving me and 2 to 3 other employees to close, depending on how many dogs we had, sometimes as few as a couple dozen, but often well over 100 in the busy times. My primary responsibility was closing down the office work, closing the register, making sure all paperwork was in order, etc. Once that was done, I had to pick up with finishing bigger tasks, like taking out the trash and laundry, but the actual animal care was supposed to be the other employee's job. If they needed help with things like cleaning cages or dishes or non-animal handling things, I was happy to do so. They just needed to tell me. They knew what needed to be done, and if they didn't tell me, I did the other tasks and had no reason to think they hadn't finished their tasks. Also, keep in mind that the managers were always on our rears to finish up and clock out by 9:15. Barely doable with the staff they gave us when we had 30 dogs. When we had 100 plus dogs, we often were much later, something we were as unhappy about as the managers were. One very busy night, this one guy, we'll call him Michael, I don't even remember at this point, was in charge of the small dog room. Because it's indoors rather than a big building with runs, it could only hold about 15 dogs, and thus took a lot less time than the big main building. The person on the small dog room was expected to be finished that room and then go out and finish with the rest of the dogs. By the time I was done with my office work, Michael was up at the big building with our coworker, and I asked whether there was anything they needed help with or whether I could focus on the trash and laundry and making sure doors were locked. Michael said everything was done in the dog room and there were no problems. So I moved on with my job, and about 15 minutes later, it was already 9:45, we were done and left. The next morning, I get called into the small dog room, and my manager angrily gestures at the sink. There are 4 or 5 dog bowls sitting there that hadn't been cleaned and put away. She asked me why they weren't done. I pointed out that the small dog room was Michael's responsibility, and he had told me he'd done everything. She said it was the responsibility of everyone to make sure every task was done before we left, no matter who had been officially in charge of the task. I didn't point out that I highly doubted she'd hold the other employees accountable if I messed up doing my tasks. I apologized, but figured in my head that I was getting a verbal warning because it was only 4 to 5 bowls that had been forgotten and was easily fixed and would be something I would make note of for the future. Instead, all of us got an official mark on our records. Cue malicious compliance. From there on out, I took my sweet time checking and double checking that every job was done and done so that there would never be the smallest question that it hadn't been done well enough, no matter how small. I also made sure that my coworkers went behind me and did the same thing. A small piece of debris missed while sweeping the floor, got to do it again. Better wash those bowls again. The bed in this empty cage looks slightly askew. Better fix that. I'd check to make sure every door was closed and locked, and then do it again 2 or more times. Now, because the managers couldn't be bothered to make the people responsible for doing their job actually responsible for their own job, we all had to spend the time checking behind everyone else, which meant that we added another 15 to 20 minutes of time on top of actually doing the job. Make me responsible for doing someone else's job instead of expecting them to actually do their job? It's going to cost you an hour of overtime combined. This tale had me howling. You took your duties doggedly and then unleashed some pup-tastic malicious compliance. It's a rough situation when management unfairly barks up your tree, but you didn't roll over. You meticulously covered every territory and locked every door, making them pay for their mistakes. Here's a high paw for not letting them lead you astray and teaching us all a possum lesson. This next story comes to us from Captain David. Woman wasn't expecting she would be having a riding buddy. Let's jump right in. This malicious compliance takes place in the Czech Republic, where many people are often really grumpy. My girlfriend, 30, and I, male 21, were waiting for a bus ride to go to her hometown for a wedding. As you'd expect, we had 3 bags, and they were packed to the point where zipping the bag required you to sit on it, especially her bag, as she was one of the bridesmaids. Before we boarded the bus, we had to wait for the passengers who had paid beforehand to reserve seats. My girlfriend and I had not prepaid. We were in somewhat of a line which allowed for the passengers who reserved seats to pass. The line for unreserved seat passengers was essentially respected, except by this woman. She arrived when the line was somewhat being formed and decided to stand next to us. As our turn to board was coming up, she quickly scooted in front of my girlfriend and looked forward as if she was completely oblivious to the fact she had done something that was traditionally frowned upon. My girlfriend was obviously quite annoyed and started saying out loud in English, much of the older generation in this country doesn't understand English very well. Well, that's a bitchy thing to do. Can you believe this woman? I was calm, as I had counted how many people had already boarded the bus, and there was still a good chance we'd find seats together in the unreserved rows, so I didn't think it called for any type of confrontation. Still, I had calmly responded, let's be honest, we can't be surprised when bitches do bitchy things. Looking back, it was unnecessary, but I was also tired and the bags were heavy, so I was a bit impatient. We finally sit down and my girlfriend chose to sit in the 2 free seats behind her. I would have chosen the seats in front of her and then just slowly reclined my seat back every few minutes so that she wouldn't have noticed my little act of revenge, but this ended up being better. It's important to note that the row the woman chose was the last row with an overhead shelf for bags. The shelf was a little longer in the front, so every person essentially had space for their bag if they moved their bags a little towards the front of the bus. It's also important to mention that the shelf was essentially empty, and I could have placed another 5 bags next to ours if I wanted to. We finally hit the road, and the woman is talking on the phone, loudly I might add, saying how she's going to visit her grandson, who is so sweet, but that he plays metal music in his room, and she can't stand the sound of it. After she finishes the call, she takes off her windbreaker and plans to put it above her seat. She finally sees that my bag is directly above her seat, and instead of moving her jacket 35 centimeters to the right on the shelf or setting her jacket on the empty seat beside her, she decides to confront me in an entitled tone. "Excuse me, young man, but I can't put my jacket anywhere because your fat bag is in the way." I was bored, so I decided to act like this was a tragedy. Oh no, what will we do? Maybe if we put our heads together we can find a solution. Her face turned from shock to old communist grandma rage. She yelled back, "Well, don't you know that the shelf space is for the person directly below the seat?" Oh, I'm so sorry. I truly didn't know that was like an unspoken rule. So the space above your seat is only for you and the potential passenger next to you? I say, truly acting sorry and embarrassed. Yes, it is. So please move it to your spot, she says, acting victorious. Of course, right away. I quickly get up and take my girlfriend's bag off the shelf and place it on the seat where I was sitting next to her. I kept my bag in the exact same spot and plopped myself right next to the old woman with a grin. The look on her face was absolutely priceless, as she was trying to understand what just happened. I smile at her, take my headphones out, and play some death metal way too loud, so that she can definitely hear it. I might have hearing loss. I don't even like death metal, but it was definitely worth it knowing she was annoyed the whole time. My girlfriend was sad I didn't sit next to her for the bus ride, but she ultimately agreed it was the best way to get back at her. Well, I must check myself before I get too carried away with this bagload of puns, but that story certainly begged my attention. This feisty lady sure seemed to carry on with her entitlement, providing a case study in bad manners. OP handled this beautifully though, making sure she zipped her lip and providing some heavy metal to her supposed piece. This next story comes to us from FGBP. I'm waiting for the customer, boss. Let's jump right in. I wanted to post this in r/petty revenge, but I think the malicious compliance part is more suitable here. My dad does food delivery service in his leisure time. He said he likes the community among the riders. All riders, motorcycle is really preferred for the traffic around the town, are provided with a helmet and a jacket that match the company logo color, plus some details on them. Delivery to hotels are common, as our town is one of favorite tourist destinations in the country, and traffic could be really a thing, especially during the holidays, while people craving for local cuisine but don't really want to deal with it. On to the malicious compliance story. One day, Dad got an order to deliver to Marriott Hotel. He was told by the security to leave the jacket behind before entering the lobby and while waiting for the desk to come for their food there. He argued about leaving the jacket behind, worrying as the motorcycle parking area is quite in the open. So the security told him to leave it in the concierge. This annoyed him, but he complied anyway. He gathered from other riders that the same security guy has been asking the same, and sometimes with a condescending tone. Dad came up with a little evil plan. This security guy mostly works in the day shift, so when he got another order to Marriott during the day, Dad took off his shirt and left it in the bike's container under the seat and wore nothing under the jacket. He walked towards the lobby, glancing the security who stood there with a smug face, and headed towards the concierge, took off his jacket, and sat pretty on the couch in the lobby while the receptionist looked at him with horror. What are you even doing? I'm waiting for the customer, boss. Bare-chested? Where's your shirt? It's a hot day, boss. I ride around the town with only my jacket on. No delivery jacket allowed in lobby, no? Your colleague, that security guy, told me so. Just leave the food with me, and please put your jacket back on. Thank you. The security guy realized the situation a bit late and could only watch the whole exchange with his jaw dropped. Next time my dad gets an order to Marriott, the same guy just told him to leave it with him. This cheeky tale of your dad's delivery exploits really hit the spot. Your dad, refusing to be taken for a ride, seasoned that security guard with a hot plate of petty revenge. His bare-chested response to the no jacket rule cooked up quite a stir, serving up discomfort a la carte. He truly proved that the best way to resolve a uniform beef is to strip to the bone. The security guard surely bit off more than he could chew and won't be dressing down the riders again soon. After all, who knew that delivering justice could be such a dish? And that right there is some fast food for thought. This last story comes to us from Oreo Lover 63. Sit in a broken chair? If you say so. Let's jump right in. Several years ago, I worked in a group home helping people with mental illnesses. During the day, we had 2 to 3 staff working at a time. We would work with the clients, and then at the end of our shift, we would log what we did. There was one office with 3 computers in it. One day, I came in, and the chair for one of those 3 desks was broke. It was obviously unsafe to sit in. I asked my coworkers if anyone had reported this to our manager. My coworkers told me that our manager stated the chair was not broken, even though it was cracked and leaning to one side. I thought this was so ridiculous, I took a picture of the chair and sent it to my friends, and we all got a good laugh about the definitely not broken chair. The next day I came into work and everything was fine, until it was time to log everything in the computer. There were 3 of us, and now with only 2 usable desks, we had to take turns doing notes, while the other just stay there. Our manager came in and asked why one of us was just sitting there. We pointed out that the chair was unsafe, and we could not use the desk without it. Side note, just before I was hired to work here, I had a serious medical problem, in which for 9 months, I was unable to eat solid food, and had lost so much weight I was only 80 pounds. My recommended weight is 140 pounds for my body type. I was getting better, and my manager and coworkers were completely unaware that this was the reason for my weight. My boss insisted that the chair could be used. He then told my 2 other coworkers that they were too fat, and that's why the chair broke. He stated that he wasn't going to buy any new office furniture until everyone in the office had lost weight, because we were costing the company money by damaging the furniture. He explained that I was a healthy weight. I most certainly was not, and everyone should be more like me. To prove that this chair was safe and obesity was the problem, my boss asked me to demonstrate to my coworkers how an ideal employee can use this chair. My boss was expecting to sit in the chair carefully and cautiously, since it was really broken. But I wouldn't be here if that's what happened. I plopped down in the chair. It broke in half instantly and I fell to the ground. I then pointed out to my boss that company policy requests that he fill out an incident report due to my fall. The next day, my boss calls me into his office and shows me the incident report he filed, in which he told corporate that I had intentionally broken a usable chair. He explained that corporate was angry and had demanded that he take the cost of a new chair out of my paycheck. I mentioned that he forgot to add a few details to his report, which I would be happy to fill corporate in on. The first being the chair was indeed broken, and I had a picture from the day before the incident to prove it was already broken. My boss said I was lying. I showed him the photo and he went white. I further explained that he forgot to tell them he ordered me to sit in the chair despite several people mentioning it looked unsafe, and I had 2 witnesses to that statement. I got up and stated that I would let corporate know now before I forget. My boss panicked and stated that he would not take the cost out of my paycheck and he would order new chairs, which we desperately needed for all the desks. Don't call my friends fat and try to push unhealthy body images. Well, it seems like this story took quite the cheerful turn. Working in a group home should be about providing support, not making weighty accusations. The boss really took a seat on the wrong side, claiming the chair was fine and blaming their employee's size for the damage. Thankfully, OP didn't let this weighty issue slide and decided to put the boss's claims to the test. The result? Chairmageddon. But with evidence in hand, they made it clear that the boss's report was as shaky as a wobbly chair leg. It's important to remember that we should lift each other up, not bring each other down. Kudos to OP for standing up for their friends and reminding us all that healthy body images are worth fighting for. Check out all 4 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.